They're doing a better job than anybody in the world right now in testing. There's nobody close. And other nations admit this. Other nations have admitted it very strongly. Other nations are calling us, wanting to know about our testing. Let me know when she was appointed, would you?
Specifically,
Go ahead,
what
please.
she was saying was that there had been a delay in the lab.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Only last week, there were multiple flights coming from China full of medical supplies.
Yes.
Companies like Huawei and Alibaba has been donating to
Right.
the United States
People I know very well.
1.5 million N95 masks and also a lot of medical gloves and much more medical supplies.
Sounds like a statement more than a question.
And Chinese Ambassador Cui Tiankai last night wrote an op-ed on New York Times calling to cooperation with the United States. So are you personally working directly with China?
We just signed a trade deal.
Also fighting with the
It's the
virus?
biggest deal probably ever made. And I hope they're going to honor that trade deal. If they don't honor the trade deal, then I'll tell you a different answer. But I think they will. They're going to spend billions of dollars for agriculture. They're going to spend billions of dollars for many different things, whereas
Well,
China
medical
never spent
supplies.
money in our country. We spent money. We had a deficit, a trade deficit with China for years of $500 billion, $400 billion. We had the biggest trade deficits in the history of the world with China. Now China's going to spend a lot, has agreed to spend 250 billion, many billions of dollars in our country, much of it going to farmers and manufacturers. So I'll let you know. I mean, I hope they're going to honor the deal. We'll find
with
out.
China, are you cooperating with
I don't
China?
know. Who are you working for, China?
I
You
don't
work for
know. I'm
China or are
working
you with a
for Hong
newspaper?
Kong.
Who are you with?
Hong Kong Phoenix TV.
Who owns that, China?
It's
Is it owned by
based in
China?
Hong Kong.
No, is it owned by the state?
No, it's not. It's a private-owned company.
Okay, good. Okay. Look, I'll let you know. I'll give you a good answer to that in a few months. I wanted to see what they do. Because it's time for them to help us, okay? It's time right now for China to help us. And hopefully they do. And if they don't, that's okay too. But we signed a deal. It was signed with great goodwill and spirit. And it's time that our farmers benefited, our manufacturers benefited, and we'll see whether or not that deal is honored. And I think it will be, because I know President Xi, who I like and respect, and I think he will honor the deal he made with us. It just went into effect 4 days ago. I will see whether or not. In fact, I called up just a little while ago. I said, how are the farmers doing with respect to China? Are they buying the product as anticipated? And the answer was, yeah, I think so. But it wasn't the most positive, but it was starting. The deal just started. So I'll let you know. But, you know, for many, many years, China ate our lunch because we had people in this position that I'm in right now that allowed China to get away with absolute murder. And it should have never happened. But we are now dealing with China. We'll see what happens. Yeah, please.
Mr. President,
Wait.
I'll tell you
How
when
many
she
do
was
you want?
appointed.
How many do you want to ask?
So I was going to answer your question you asked me. She was appointed in January of this year to her current position
Good.
as the Principal Deputy Inspector
Okay,
General.
we're going to take a look at it. Go ahead.
I know you don't want to talk
On the
Don't-
issue
don't
of
interrupt. He's
on the issue
talking.
of small business loans, sir, you said that businesses have applied for $40 billion in loans, but can you tell us how much of that money has actually gone out to the small businesses?
I can't tell you, but I know it goes out very quickly once the loan application's approved, and the process is very fast. And you have to understand, these are banks, and that's what they do, but they were swamped. They were actually swamped. Okay, go ahead.
I know you don't want to talk about the Inspector General report, but testing is still a big issue in this country. When can hospitals
Put the
expect?
slide up again, please.
When can
Just put it up.
hospitals expect to receive a quick turnaround of
Are you
these
ready?
test results?
Are you ready? Hospitals can do their own testing also. States can do their own testing. States are supposed to be doing testing. Hospitals are supposed to be doing testing. Do you understand that? We're the federal government. Listen to me. We're the federal government. We're not supposed to stand on street corners doing testing. They go to doctors. They go to hospitals. They go to the state. The state is a more localized government. You have 50 of them, and they can go 50 within here. You also have territories, as you know. And they do the testing. And if you look at the chart, if you take a look, did they put it up? Yeah. Just take a look. And these are testing, and the results are now coming in very quickly. initially speaking, the tests were old, obsolete, and not really prepared. We have a brand-new testing system that we developed very quickly, and that's your result. And you should say, congratulations, great job, instead of being so horrid in the way you ask a question. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, today,
Yeah, I'd love to have the Admiral speak to that question. Yes, it's a great idea.
So I can talk a little bit more about testing later on, but as the President said, 1.79 million tests have been done, and this does not count the hundreds of thousands of tests that are done within hospitals that are now currently not reporting, so I'm sure we're well over 2 million. That Inspector General report was done here, 23rd, 24th, during our ramp-up period, quite a long time ago. There was clearly, and it's hard to interpret the report because it mixes up all kinds of things, but clearly there was complaints by some hospitals of a backlog, probably at send-out tests, and that is true. There were several days of backlog at some of the major labs that have been taken care of. We know now that the ACLA labs now have a 24 to 48-hour turnaround. They're doing well over 100,000 tests a day. We now have the Abbott machine that's point of care. That's 18,000 of those instruments throughout the country. The Cepheid machine is now all across the country with a 45-minute turnaround. We have worked directly with many of the hospitals that have their own laboratory-derived tests. Some of those really, quite frankly, didn't understand the regulatory freedom they have to use other different kinds of instruments or different kinds of reagents. Like they do now, and I'm on the phone with them all the time to make sure that everything is clear. We have a 24-hour call number, but that's what it was there for. And I don't know the Inspector General. I don't know that person. I tell you one thing I have a problem with. If there was such a problem that she knew about or he knew about on March 23rd and 24th, why did I find out about the tests from them on the news media at 8 o'clock this morning? If there was a problem, I think you're ethically obliged to tell me where that is so we can interact with it like I do every single day. But that's a discussion for the future. I think testing is really in a good position right now, and I'd be happy to expand on some of the really good tests that are coming up.
How long has that person been in government? Could I ask you that?
Did serve in the previous administration.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. Oh, I see. You didn't tell me that, John. You didn't tell me that. Did serve in the previous administration. You mean the Obama administration. Thank you for telling me that. See, there's a typical fake news deal.
You asked me when she was appointed. I told you when she was appointed.
You're a
by your
third-rate
administration.
reporter, and what you just said is a disgrace, okay? You asked me, you said, sir, just got appointed. Take a look at what you said now. I said, when did this person, how long in government? Well, it was appointed in the Obama administration. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. You will never make it. Go ahead, please.
On the ventilators,
Well,
maybe
that's a
this is best for
terrible-
Admiral Jawar, but can you tell us today how many ventilators are in the federal stockpile?
I'm not going to tell you how many are in the stockpile, but I can tell you that we look at ventilator use granularly every single day in every single state and down to the hospital level. So we have been able to meet and easily meet all the ventilator requirements that have been brought to us by the state. No one has not gotten a ventilator that needs a ventilator. And as far as we can project, looking at all models, every person who needs a ventilator will get a ventilator. I'm a ventilator doc, right? I'm an ICU physician for children. Spent every day of my life managing people on ventilators. This is my community. It's also the Surgeon General's community as an anesthesiologist. So what we have in the stockpile, I think, is not a number that we give out, but we have thousands remaining in the stockpile. And now you're seeing out of the appropriate American spirit that when a state like Washington or California doesn't need that ventilator, they're doing the right thing by moving them around the country.
It's about 9,000, just so you understand. That's right. It's about 9,000. And by the way, you didn't tell me also that this Inspector General came out of the Obama administration. You didn't tell me that
So
either.
everybody up there.
Okay, please, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm looking, sir, just quickly here, I'm looking at this Inspector General's bio. She appears to have served in government since 1999, but I was hoping to ask you about your call with former Vice President Joe Biden. Is there something that you learned on that phone call, and has that changed your
No, I
opinion?
understood his views before the call.
Has that changed your opinion about speaking to people
I
like...
just think he's very nice. I think he's a nice man. I've always thought he was a nice man. I don't know him. I don't know if I ever spoke to him before. other than to say hello. But I think he's a nice man. We had a very nice call.
Do you want to seek now the counsel of some of your predecessors, George Bush,
No, but
Barack
we
Obama?
may, no, not really. We're doing a great job. Hey, this administration, we inherited a broken system, both militarily, where we've rebuilt our military, where we now have so much ammunition, where, as you remember, a very important general said, sir, we have no ammunition. They wanted to save money on ammunition. They didn't want to save money because they spent money like nobody ever spent money. But you know what? We now have a great military rebuilt, and we have so much ammunition, we don't know what to do with it, okay? And that's a nice feeling to have. But they also gave us empty cupboards. The cupboard was bare. You've heard the expression, the cupboard was bare. So we took over a stockpile where the cupboard was bare and where the testing system was broken and old. And we redid it. And frankly, it would be okay for a small event, but not for a big event. And they had a chance to do it. Somebody said that a certain person, I won't tell you, but a certain person said this will happen. And that's true. The problem is that person never did anything about it. Previous administrations they never did anything about it. You know, we all know all about pandemics and all of the things that we're seeing now, but nobody thought it was going to happen. And if we did think it was going to happen, the problem is nobody did anything about it. We did. We have rebuilt the system, and now we're a fine-tuned machine. We built thousands of hotel beds for New York. We moved a ship in that now we're going to make for COVID-19. We are going to make it so that people having this horrible thing happen to them will be able to use the ship. The ship, as I said, is going to be shared with New Jersey, New York and New Jersey. We've done things that are incredible. When you build, 18 hospitals? We built 18 hospitals. We built medical centers all over the country. And when you have Gavin Newsom and other governors who really have been very nice and generous in their statements, because they make the statements to the press, not just to my face. Others tell us how great we're doing, like the call that Mike had today. I heard from other people that were on the call. He said it was incredible. It was 2 hours, and everything was positive. They were so happy with what we've done. And we're ready to do more if they need it, because we're ready to march. The Admiral can tell you, we are sitting there with 9,000 ventilators, and we're ready to march when we see that we can move very quickly. As soon as we see that need, we can move very quickly. We're ready to march. We built a great system. The problem is the Democrats, like a guy like Chuck Schumer, who's a total lightweight, by the way. I've known him for a long time. He'll say, why don't you put a military man in charge? Military man? I have all military men. This man is doing an incredible job. We have 2 admirals, numerous generals. We have the Army Corps of Engineers. We have FEMA. We have this whole force that like nobody's ever seen before. We have a great military operation, and they've done an incredible job. And honestly, people should respect, because nobody's ever seen anything like what we've done. And what they end up with, forget about me, don't worry about me. I will only get bad. If I say, how many ventilators do you need, Governor? 1,000 would be great. I said, nope, I'm going to send you 10,000. And then you'll call up from the media. You'll say, how did Trump do? We're not happy he didn't send us enough ventilators. Because that's called politics. But if you look at what's happening, and I'm even surprised, the governors are saying all good things, but the Democrat governors, and a couple of rhinos, frankly, they're rhinos, that's all they are, one rhino in particular, but the governors are saying great things. He had a call that lasted 2 hours today. I heard about that call, not just from Mike. It was a perfect call. Now, I'm sure you were on the call, even though you're not supposed to be. I'm sure you were on the call, meaning some of the media was on the call, because they're constantly reporting the call. If they're honest, they will say it was a great call. Okay? Okay, next question, please.
Mr. President?
Here we go.
So,
Here we
you
go.
didn't mention the hospitals that were built in New Orleans and Dallas today, but you've mentioned them a number of times previously. There seems to be some concern in Texas that they might lose the hospital in Dallas if it's not used.
We're never going to do anything that hurts
If it's not
Texas.
used yet.
We're only helping
Applications,
Texas.
is there-
By the way, the governor's doing a great job over there with this situation. And Texas is so big, you have some parts of the state that are affected, other parts that aren't affected at all. You know, it's an incredible place.
But can they keep this hospital even if it's unused? Or is the federal government going to shift those resources elsewhere?
No, we're going to use whatever we need, and we're doing it totally in conjunction with the governor. okay? We're doing it in conjunction with your Texas governor, who's done a fantastic job. Great.
Governor Abbott also has set up checkpoints at the border to check people coming
Yep.
in from Louisiana. We've seen checkpoints in Florida, other state borders. Americans are not
Very
really-
few people are coming through our border, and you'll be happy to know, we're up to mile 161 of the wall.
Internal borders between states.
Oh, I see,
Americans
okay.
are not
But
used
on the
to
border
seeing-
between Mexico, we have
We're-
161 miles of wall.
About internal borders,
Okay, good.
Americans don't, they're not used to seeing border checkpoints between states. How much longer, and is that something that states have to deal with you?
First, you want us to call 8 governors and tell them to do something. And then you're complaining that another governor is so strict that he actually checks the borders. I understand why he's doing that, because he knows who he has, and he doesn't want people coming in if they should maybe, not be to
Is
the
it a role for
liking
federal
of the
government to
doctors.
decide?
No, I think look, he's done a great job. He's done a great job with this case, as have many other governors, but he's done a great job. One of the things I thought you were going to say is we've been very tough on our southern border, as you know, very, very tough. And part of that's because of the fact that we have so much, when you talk about 160 miles of new wall, nobody's coming through that, nobody, not even close. And we're building it rapidly. We will have, early next year, we'll have close to 500 miles of wall, which is what our goal was. Please, go.
You mentioned Senator Schumer just a moment ago. He had a conference call today, and he said that he believes that a COVID-4 relief bill will be necessary. Do you share that belief, and what would be contained in such a
I
bill?
don't know necessarily, but I certainly want to listen. And what I want to do is 2 things. A real infrastructure, not a Green New Deal, the carbon footprint. I'm not looking for the carbon footprint. We want to put people to work. But and frankly, for so many years, we've let our infrastructure go to hell because we were wasting all our money in the Middle East and other places, okay? I want to rebuild our country. I don't want to rebuild. We're tired. We've rebuilt, if you call it that. We're destroyed, frankly. What we've done is so crazy. What we have done, the direction that this country has taken is so sad. But we're in the Middle East for $8 trillion. And if you want to fix a pothole in a highway, you can't do it because they don't want to give you the funds. So we want to have an infrastructure bill, a real one, like in the vicinity of $2 trillion to completely rebuild our roads, our bridges, our highways, our tunnels, everything. And I'm totally open to listening to that. I'm also open to listening to and even putting forward, because we're going to be putting something forward, more money for our citizens because they've gone through trauma. This has been trauma. This came out of nowhere. And I say it, and I'll say it again, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. We had the most people working in the history of our country, almost 160 million people, far more than ever before. And then one day, our professionals correctly came to us and they said, sorry, sir, we have to close down our country. And I said, say it again. Say it again. We have to close down our country. And the entire world closed down because of this hidden enemy. No, we're going to take good care of our people. It was not their fault.
Dr. Birx to clarify something that she said on Saturday,
Go
sir.
ahead. Yes, please.
May I ask Dr. Birx to clarify something that she said on Saturday? If I may, Dr. Birx, this is a question that comes from a radio colleague of mine, Tamara Keith. And on Saturday, it sounded like you said that for the next week, people in high-risk areas should not even go to the market or the drugstore. Is that what you meant to say, or is that accurate?
Out of respect for every single healthcare worker that's on the front line, whether they're a nurse, a doctor, a respiratory therapist, the phlebotomist, the persons who come in the rooms to clean, out of respect for them, we as Americans should be doing everything possible. And what I meant was, if you can consolidate, if you can send one person, the entire family doesn't need to go out on these occasions. We really need, this is a highly transmittable virus. We've been saying that we want every American to know that what they're doing is making a difference, but we need to have solidarity of commitment from everyone to really, so you know, maybe once every 2 weeks, we can do a grocery store and pharmacy shop for the entire family. So it was really about, we have to do everything we can. I know I see on the TV stations the level of human suffering in the hospitals. Dr. Fauci and I and Admiral Giroir have spent our lives taking care of others. We need to take care of each other now as Americans and do everything that's in those guidelines. And I know they're tough. I know incredibly how tough they are. My grandchild of 10 months got a fever of 105 this weekend. I'm the doctor, and I couldn't get there. I mean, so I'm trying to explain to my daughter how to listen to her lungs, how to listen to her lungs,
So you
and then the
did not
baby's
get there.
lungs.
You did not get there?
I did not go there.
Good, I'm very happy with that.
Because of you two. I mean, when you can't take that kind of risk with the leaders of the country.
Your grandson's
So,
okay?
daughter, but she's
That's a
coming
lot
out
of
of it.
temperature, 105.
Yes. But, you know, we're all, and that's just an illustration that I know you all are making sacrifices, and I guess I want everyone to take this seriously. So that was really a call of seriousness of how important this is and how we're starting to see the impact, but you can see what can happen when you come at this a little bit too late. And that's why the message, before you see it, before you have to see your hospitals and your emergency rooms overwhelmed, it is on us as a member of this community, of this country, to do everything possible to save one another. And so that was really what I was saying, and I will continue to say that, because I do believe it's making a difference. You can start to see it making a difference, but we have to do even more right now, because that will predict where we are 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Thank you, Deborah. And it is making a big difference. I saw where Governor Cuomo was a little bit upset today over the weekend. A lot of people outside, and they were pretty big groups of people. I saw that. I noticed that, and he wasn't happy with that. And I could understand that. Look, we have a short period of time. Hopefully, it's a short period of time to go, and let's get it done. Let's get it done. Kristen, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank
You're
you.
so
Quick
quiet
follow to, just got here,
Because you
apologies.
have your own show.
No. Quick follow to the question about legislation. I know there's discussion about a phase 4,
Yeah.
but are you also looking seriously at a second round of direct payments? And are you putting discussions on a potential phase 4 on hold for now while you pursue that?
Well, I was opposed to the way of distribution, money distribution through, as you know, unemployment and through the state offices, because they have very old, not all of them, but many of them have 40-year-old equipment, as I've said, and it makes it very difficult. But that's what they're that's what they want to do. That's the way it's mandated to do. I thought it would be better if we did a direct payment system, but the Democrats really wanted it, and I think they had some help from a couple of people that I would have, had I spoken to them, I would have convinced them otherwise, I really believe. But it's getting out, and the federal government has done its job. All we can do is give this massive amount of money to the states. The states then are responsible to distribute it, a little bit like we're talking about here. But the money will be right on time from the federal government. Then the states have to do their job in getting it out.
There needs to be a second round of those payments. I would say.
We could very well do a second round of direct. I would do it direct.
Is that under serious discussion
It's
right
under,
now?
it is absolutely under serious consideration.
And in terms of Chuck Schumer, he also said he spoke to your chief of staff about potentially appointing a czar to oversee the supply chain. Is that something that you
But
would
we
consider
have people
doing?
that are so talented. I know the people he suggested. They're wonderful people. They worked here. They're wonderful people. He's just doing that because it's politics. Because you know
point
what?
person right now, Mr.
We have many, depending on what. In terms of testing, this gentleman right here. You know who the point person is? This gentleman right here. He's the one in charge of the task force. But Mike, you may want to tell him about them, because this is really a military operation.
Mr. Vice President, in terms of the supply chain.
Let me answer your
Please,
first question, if I may, because
Yeah.
it's a very good question, and I spoke to Senator Schumer night before last about just that. When the president signed a declaration of national emergency, he stood up FEMA as the lead agency implementing his policy to marshal a whole of government response. And under FEMA, we provide federal support. The state manages the healthcare response, and healthcare providers and first responders implement that response on a local level. Our lead on this issue in implementing it is Administrator Pete Gaynor. But the man managing all of the supplies, and you heard a presentation this weekend about our air bridge, what we also call the control tower. We literally, with Admiral John Polovchik at the helm of our logistics effort, we have visibility now on all the supplies that are moving across this country and into this country from around the world. It really is extraordinary. I mean, when the president tapped FEMA to lead this effort, we essentially wanted to say, we want to organize this in a military fashion. And we tapped really someone who is widely regarded as the #1 supplies and logistics military officer to do just that. He really is an extraordinary individual. Admiral Juar has known him for a long time. And to be working with Admiral Polovchik, we speak every morning. Our team reviews the data. We go over that with Administrator Gaynor and Admiral Polovchik. We talk about an extensive team that's identifying supplies around the country and around the world. And then, as we were explaining to governors today, we work with the requests that are coming in from states with a priority on the areas that are dealing with widespread outbreak, like the greater New York City area, New Jersey, Louisiana, focus on Detroit, focus on Chicago and Illinois. And then what Pete Gaynor and Admiral Polovchik are doing is directing those commercial distributors to send the resources directly to the front lines of the battle against the coronavirus. It is an extraordinary system. And as I explained to the governors today, as I've explained to congressional leaders, who've made what I think is a good faith recommendation, that we organize this in a manner of military logistics. It's exactly what President Trump has done. And it's what we're doing every single day to make sure that healthcare workers, to make sure that the states that are dealing with a widespread outbreak of coronavirus can be confident that we're going to spare no expense, leave no stone unturned, and use this extraordinary apparatus centered in FEMA to get the people of our country what they need, when they need it, to battle the coronavirus.
And Kristen, when Schumer makes a statement like that, he's only doing it for politics. He knows. We have the best generals, the best admirals, we have the best people. These are incredible leaders. These are vibrant people. They've done such a good job. And again, you'll get a tape of the conversation, because I'm sure some of the governors probably had their favorite reporter listening to the conversation, even though they weren't supposed to, but that's happened before. Just so you understand, we had a call today that was a beautiful call, everybody friendly, everybody happy. They also know in some cases we'll get them a little bit more, and if they need it, we'll get them a lot more depending on where this monster is going. But when Schumer does that, take a look at the past. Well, you know, you're gonna have to tell me who. They certainly don't. Well, yeah, some Democrats, because they view this as a campaign issue. They want to make Trump look as bad as they can because they want to try and win an election that they shouldn't be allowed to win, based on the fact that we have done a great job. We built the greatest economy in the world. I'll do it a second time. We got artificially stopped by a virus that nobody ever thought possible. And we've handled it, and we've built a team, and we've built an apparatus that's been unbelievable. Take a look at the swine flu, right? That's H1N1. Take a look at that. And it's not the other way around, by the way. It's H1N1. You know what I mean by that. Take a look at the swine flu. It was a disaster. 17,000 people died. The other administration, they didn't even know. It was like they didn't even know it was here. And that was peanuts compared to what we have in terms of the power, the magnitude of what we're going through. This is attacking 182 countries simultaneously. So Schumer's just all about politics. I've known him almost all of my adult life. And he's a disgrace. In many ways, he's a disgrace. And he knows it's done. He just wants to do that. But he knows the job we're doing. Everybody's amazed at the job we're doing. And the public is starting to find out. You know, one of the reasons I do these news conferences, because if I didn't, they would believe fake news. And we can't let them believe fake news. They see us up here. They see us with admirals. They see us with this talent. They see the job that Mike Pence has done, which has been an unbelievable job, an unbelievable job. I put him there. I thought he'd do well. He did great as the governor of Indiana, and I thought Mike would do well. He's done much better than well. And he gets along with people, I think, much better than I do. Because I like people being 100. Mike can put up with things that sometimes I say it's amazing that he can put up with it. But he's done an incredible job, and so has the entire team. This is a military operation. And again, we built 2,900 beds in Javits Center. We build medical centers in New York. In Chicago, we built 1,000 beds, much more now, in McCormick Place. That's their big convention hall, the equivalent of Javits Convention Hall. Big McCormick Place, fantastic place. By the way, the mayor of Chicago, at least on the phone, is extremely happy with what we're doing, thanking us, has a great relationship with Mike, thanking us. And I just wish the politicians would say to you what they say to us, really. And it's a good question. Do you have one? Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr.
And
President,
we'll get to
a national security question and then a question about Governor Cuomo. The national security front, to the extent that you can comment on this, your administration is making heavy preparations to move against the cartels in Latin America right now. And could you
said
expand,
Latin America?
Yes.
Yes.
Could you expand on the reasoning of why now? Are there supply and
Yeah.
logistics especially weak? Is it political?
Yeah.
What's the reasoning?
Good question. We've moved a tremendous number of boats and ships to the area of, different areas of exactly what you're talking about, because we're tired of drugs pouring into our country from other places. And we're tired of seeing drugs pouring into different parts of Latin America, South America, and just coming into our country. Now we've got them stopped at the border, and they're trying to do it by sea. So we stop them at the border and frankly, with the help of Mexico. Mexico right now has 27,000 soldiers on our southern border. They never had any soldiers. They're doing that because I've asked them to do it. That's the only reason they're doing it. They have 27,000 soldiers. So now they're trying to bring it in by boat and by ship, the drug lords and the people doing drugs and trying to destroy our country from inside with drugs. And we're hitting them very, very hard. And that's why we're doing it.
Activities that U.S. assets are targeting, or
Say it?
is it beyond narcotics? Are there other illicit activities that
Well,
U.S.
there
assets are
are
targeting?
the activities of human trafficking, and especially with respect to women. And as you know, proportionally, it's mostly women. And it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
Opportunistic?
And there's never been a time like it. And it's because of the internet. And this is all over the world. But for the most part, they're coming through, in this country, they're coming through the southern border. But we're hitting them very hard. They have tremendous illegal trafficking in women and children also, but mostly in women. And it's illegal, and it's horrible, and it's disgraceful. And I've seen things that are an absolute disgrace. And we're trying to knock them out, and we're knocking them hard. And again, I want to thank the president of Mexico, because he has really stepped up to the plate. 27,000 soldiers. They've never had any soldiers on our border. And I did that because the Democrats will not approve anything to stop, because they want to have open borders. They want to have all these people flowing through our border. And in many cases, they're sick. They have problems that you don't want to know about. Or they're criminals in many cases. Not in all cases, but in many cases. And they don't want to have, they want to have open borders. They want to have sanctuary cities. So they protect criminals. And I don't want to have it. And Joe Biden does want to have that also, as you know, because he said that during numerous debates. I want to have strong borders. And I don't like protecting criminals with sanctuary cities. But we're doing it for drugs. We're doing it for human trafficking. We're doing it because you have to do it. We either have borders or we don't have a country. All right, go ahead.
Why did he
please.
move?
Mr. President, on the question of antibody testing, which is FDA approved now, but not widely available yet. I know the Admiral said by May you expect to have millions available. How are you going to prioritize who's going to get the antibody tests, and what is that going to show you? Do you think that's going to be immunity?
I mean, I have an answer, but I'd rather have the Admiral answer that.
So let me clarify, and I know you probably understand this, is the antibody test does not tell you if you have the active virus in your nose. If you're positive for the antibody, it strongly implies, it means that you have had the virus before. And to the degree that we know of medical knowledge, you will probably, highly probably, be protected against getting the virus again in the future. So I want to make something clear. There's no antibody test approved, okay? Approved is not a word we talk about. There is a test or two that has received emergency use authorization, and many, many, many others out there that have not gone that way yet. And I want to take this opportunity to caution. There is a very consolidated effort between the FDA, CDC, NIH to validate some of the tests that are on the market right now, because it is very important that they actually do what they say they do. And we have reason to believe that not all of them are going to perform well. I don't know the primary source, but the Financial Times just reported that the UK had 17.5 million antibody tests that they bought, and none of them work. So we're not going to get in that situation. We're going to be very careful to make sure that when we tell you you're likely immune from the disease, that test really said that. Now, I will also make a statement, and there's a lot of work on here, and I'm very excited about it. As opposed to the tests for a novel virus, the antibody type tests are very sophisticated technology, but they're old technology. This we expect to have many tens of millions of tests the first month that we are really sure that the test makes sense. So this allows for surveillance screening, and Dr. Birx is one of the world experts to understand, is 1%, 5%, 20% of Americans have been infected. But it also allows us to have very widespread, tens and tens of millions of people screened with a finger prick on the spot.
By when? Just to be, by May, you're saying this will happen? Or
Science doesn't run on rails, right? So we need to make sure that the FDA, the NIH, which they're actively doing right now, assure that the tests that they're testing really do perform the way they should. And if things work out the way we believe they will, we will have millions on the market by May in a sophisticated way, in a prospective way, that we get the surveillance we need. We can test people to see if they've been exposed, immune, and go back to work. And a combination of that kind of test with the current kind of test we have now is how America opens back up.
And how do you prioritize who gets those tests? I mean, tens of million, we're a country of 300 million. How do you determine who you're going to have that test?
Well, we are having active discussions under the leadership of Dr. Birx and the task force, but you can imagine how that is, right? But with tens and tens and tens of millions of tests per month that are available, you could really do very widespread testing. But let me just give you an example.
Which nobody else can do, by the way. No other country can do.
I'll just give you one example. It would be very important to know if the virus is still circulating here, whether, for example, a healthcare worker or a long-term care nursing home worker is immune from the virus and can't carry it. Very, very important to protect our elderly in that situation. But also, if you haven't been exposed, to make sure that you really take precautions and maybe take care of the people who don't have the virus and you don't have the virus. So it's complex, but it's not complicated on how you go about looking this in different segments of society. And I don't want to take too much more time at the podium, but antibody tests are a different thing. They're coming. We're highly confident that this can be scaled very rapidly and provide us a bit of information we just don't have now.
Jeff, go ahead.
Mr. President, may I follow up on
A
what
few
you said?
more, we'll do a few more.
May I,
And then Mike is taking over, and you're going to see some incredible work that's been done. Go ahead, please.
may I please follow up on what you said with regard to Captain Crozier before? You said
Yes.
you didn't want to punish him for having a bad day.
He had a bad day, or a bad week.
Does that
But
mean?
I don't, yeah, I'm gonna look into it, and I also think our Navy Secretary, he's a highly respected man. So sometimes that happens with people, and I'll take a look at it.
What do you mean by that? Would you consider
He had a bad
reinstating
day
him?
when he sends a letter out, and he sends copies all over the place, and it's not a classified letter. And it was very disconcerting to the families of the people on the ship, very disconcerting. So number one, they get worried and scared. It was weak. We don't want weak. But I'm going to take a look, because I think he, looks to me like he's an outstanding guy. I looked at his just a little while ago, I looked at his file, and people have bad days, and we'll take a look at it.
I guess my question is, what would you consider doing for him?
Well, we'll take a look. I want to speak also to the Secretary. I also want to speak to Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper is doing a fantastic job, and we'll, maybe I can help the situation out. I mean, you guys are saying, why is the president getting involved and going, well, I like to solve problems. It's a problem, I don't want to see men hurt, women hurt. I don't want to see people hurt unnecessarily. Maybe we can solve it easily where, it's not life-changing. But he did a bad thing, sending a letter out, and many, many copies, as you know. I don't know, I heard 28 copies, I heard a lot. That's a lot of copies. Plus, the letter was 5 pages long. I haven't read the letter, but I think it was 5 pages long, single-spaced. That's a lot of writing. He's the captain of a ship. He's a very important person of a very expensive ship, a nuclear-powered ship. He should be writing letters like that. But it happens. Sometimes I'll write a letter that I say, I wish I didn't send it. Not too often, but it happens.
Mr. President.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick follow-up on that, because the acting Navy Secretary, and I know you were asked about this, but I just want to try one more time. He did say in remarks to soldiers on the USS Roosevelt that Crozier was, quote, too naive or too stupid to be in command if he didn't think that writing that
Well, I
letter
don't want
was
to
a
comment
bad.
on what he said. I understand.
Use different language, Mr.
It's tough
President?
language, but I don't want to, let's not get into that. It's tough language. Now, there are some people that think, oh, wow, he says it like it is. Look, he made a mistake. He should not have sent that letter. Or he should have gone through his chain of command, which is the typical way of doing it. He's in the military. He's a very important person in the military. He knows it better than anybody in this room what he should have done. And I'm sure he feels he made a mistake. But I'm going to look into it, and I'm going to see maybe we can do something, because I'm not looking to destroy a person's life who's had an otherwise stellar career, as I understand it. I looked at his file just now because I've been seeing what's going on. If we can save a person's career, I don't mind going after a person if they did something wrong. And, but this was a mistake. He made a mistake. I'm not justifying what he did. He made a mistake. Shouldn't be sending letters. He's the captain. He's a very important person in the military. You don't send letters and then it leaks into a newspaper of all newspapers. That was a beauty, right? So you just don't do that. So it was a mistake. But I may get involved. I'll call Secretary of Defense and find out a little bit about it. And if I can help two good people, I'm going to help them.
Sir, on the
Your tone seems to have changed a little bit since
Say
Saturday.
it?
Your tone seems to have changed a little bit on the captain since Saturday.
With the captain?
Yeah,
No, it
is it
hasn't.
the
I
news
mean, look.
coverage, or did
Okay,
somebody
ready?
speak to you on his behalf?
I said when you asked me and when the question was asked the last time, I said, shouldn't have sent the letter. I haven't changed. He should not have sent a letter. And it should have, if there's a letter, it should go classified, and it should go to his superior. And he shouldn't be jumping over his
File,
superior.
sir. Did
So
somebody
it
ask
hasn't
you?
changed in that regard. The only thing that has played right up here with me is that I looked at his record. And he's been an outstanding person. If he wasn't, I wouldn't even be talking about this. He's been an outstanding person. He's had a very exemplary military career. I mean, he started off as a helicopter pilot. They called him Chopper. His name was Chopper. He was a great helicopter pilot. It's a tremendous skill. I know a lot about helicopters. And then he went to F-16s or F-18s, and he was a tremendous pilot. And then he's very smart. He studied nuclear energy, and he was fantastic, and very few people have the aptitude, they have the mentality to do that. Nuclear energy is very complex, it's very hard. Very few people can do it, and he did it well. And then he became the captain of a nuclear ship, right? He became replacement cost, if you look at replacement cost, $18 billion a replacement cost, right? So he's got, on a replacement cost basis, an $18 billion ship. The President Gerald Ford, very expensive. That's, the nearest thing I can think of, but they're spending money on that one like nobody's ever seen. So he made a mistake. He made a mistake. And maybe we're going to make that mistake, not destroy his life. Okay, a couple of more.
President, you mentioned medical professionals. You compared them to soldiers going out to the battlefield.
Yeah.
Many doctors and medical workers today, some have seen pay cuts. They're going into a certain environment where they're concerned about their own health, their families' livelihood, if something were to happen to them.
Very much in my mind.
As part of this phase 4, are you going to prioritize?
Doesn't have to be phase 4. I think it could be a separate phase when it's all over. Right now, I don't think they want to think about it. These people don't want to think about it. These people are incredible. They're not thinking about how much am I getting paid. These people are incredible. I've seen it. I see the spirit. I hear about it all the time. From Mike, from the Admiral, I hear about it all the time. These people are incredible. When it's all over, I do want to seriously think, maybe in the form of bonuses. These people are, what they've done is incredible. I just admire the attitude, and I've said it. They walk into those hospitals, and they are seriously, one of the things that came up with the Comfort, the ship, is that when we fulfilled the request of Governor Cuomo and Governor Murphy, and they're going to be splitting up, but, a lot of things happen to ships when you do that. It's a lot of, they didn't want to do this. In fact, they specifically didn't want to do this. Have patients that were affected with this horrible disease or whatever, the plague, because frankly, it's a plague. That's exactly what it is. You'd read about it in the old days, the plague, and that's exactly what it is. But we're doing it. But when I see the bravery of these people walking through doors without their stuff, I mean, they're just getting, they're not standing outside, hey, let's get ready, they're running through doors, putting on the stuff that's not even on. I think it's incredible. I'm telling you, the nearest thing I can think of is soldiers in battle and soldiers going right into battle, because that's what they're doing. It's really, in many ways, it's the same thing. All right, how about one more?
One more question, Mr. President. You may have seen this, the Masters tournament has been rescheduled to November. 2 questions. A, is that an outgrowth of your conversation that you had with sports commissioners on Saturday?
I hope it's rescheduled. I hope football's able to start. I hope baseball can get to play a little bit. I hope basketball can maybe do their playoffs. I mean, hey, I have no interests or anything other than I want what's good for the country.
What about the U.S.
A lot of
Open,
people
which
are
you've attended many
tired.
times?
Yeah, a lot of people are tired of looking at games that are 5 years old. I looked the other day, I saw somebody, I said, wow, he looks great. I forgot. I said, oh, that was 9 years ago. I said, he's really in great shape. Well, not in great shape now, but he was in great shape then. It was 9 years ago. You get tired of looking at 9-year-old baseball games and playoff games that took place 12 years ago. I don't have much time to do that, frankly, but that's what people are doing. And they want to see sports. Sports are a great thing for this country. And I hope football can start. And I told them, I think you might be able to. They may very well be able to. I hope they can start. And I hope they can start with people in the stands. We're not going to be separated. You have seats. Those seats are meant for people to sit next to each other. And when this virus is gone, people are going to be sitting next to each other. And just for the restaurant industry, so they understand, when the virus is gone, people are going to be sitting next to each other. One man said, I have a 200-seat restaurant. It's been great. But if I go by these rules, this 200 seats goes down to 60. I said, no. You have a 200-seat restaurant. That's what you have. But we have to wait till the virus goes away. It wouldn't even do well at 60. Frankly, there's a warmth to it also. There's a warmth. But not when we have the virus in the air. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. So I'm going to let our Vice President take over. He's got some really interesting numbers, statistics. And I want to thank the Admiral. I want to thank Tony and Deborah and everybody else. I want to thank everybody that's working. And I really do. I see a lot of tremendous things happen. The therapeutics, the call I had today was one of the most exciting calls I've had in a long time. And again, I want to wish my best to the UK and the family of Boris Johnson, and we just hope he's going to be okay because he's a fine guy. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few updates on the activity of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Then I'm going to ask Dr. Birx to speak about what we're seeing in the numbers. We know we are at the beginning of what's going to be a very tough week in America. But as Dr. Birx will reflect, because the American people have been embracing social distancing, putting into practice the advice of state and local leaders and the President's coronavirus guidelines for our country. As Dr. Birx will describe, we are not only seeing remarkable progress in Washington State and in California, where the numbers remain low and steady. That's a great tribute to the people of both of those states and to all of their dedicated healthcare workers. But we're also beginning to see a leveling, just at the very beginning. And she'll reflect on those in just a few moments. A couple of quick updates. At the present moment, the President has approved 50 major disaster declarations, and we'll likely be issuing a disaster declaration for the state of Minnesota before the end of the day. We've distributed more than $4.1 billion to states. And right after our incredible healthcare workers, we couldn't be more proud of more than 21,000 National Guard that have been activated and are working in states all across the country. During my conference call today, I learned that Governor Brian Kemp is actually using the Georgia National Guard to sanitize and clean up nursing homes. But National Guard are being deployed in a variety of ways all across the country, and to them and to the families of all these citizen soldiers, you have our admiration and our respect. As the President mentioned, our focus remains on the New York metro area, New Jersey, Louisiana, and then Michigan and Illinois. We're watching every area of the country, but those are the priorities today. And in that spirit, I spoke today, as the President did, with Governor Cuomo of New York. The President made the decision to open up the USNS Comfort to COVID patients. And he also informed the Governor of New Jersey that we would be taking New Jersey COVID patients. So now there will be two facilities, one at the Javits Center that's all COVID, and in the USNS Comfort that will be managing COVID patients. At the present moment, by this evening, there will be 2,179 medical, military personnel in New York City. And over the next 2 days, that number will rise to 3,000. Speaking with the governor, speaking with Mayor de Blasio, the President and I were informed that while we have surged ventilators, we have surged personal protective equipment, that sending in some relief for healthcare workers was vitally important. And so again, I want to emphasize that those are medical personnel, doctors and nurses and medical assistants who are on the scene now and will continue to arrive to a total number of 3,000. I spoke to Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. New Jersey is very much in the forefront of the coronavirus in America today. We want to commend the governor for his extraordinary leadership in the state. During our briefing today, we learned about the progress that they were making and also about the governor's decision to temporarily reactivate retired healthcare personnel in the state. And just as a reminder of all that we're dealing with this weekend, Governor Murphy told me that New Jersey surpassed the number of lives that were lost on September 11th to the state of New Jersey. And it breaks our heart to think of that. And our hearts go out to all of the families of the more than 10,000 Americans who have succumbed to the coronavirus. We also, as the President said, we express our gratitude to governors in Oregon and Washington State yesterday for donating ventilators to help the states at the epicenter of the coronavirus. Governor Gavin Newsom of California donated 500 ventilators. And I just learned that those will be going 200 to the state of Maryland, 50 to the District of Columbia, 100 to the state of Delaware, 100 to Nevada, and we'll also be deploying the remaining 50 to the Northern Marianas Islands and to Guam. And we want to thank Governor Gavin Newsom. The state of California has provided extraordinary and compassionate leadership for their citizens. They're making progress. As the governor said the other day, they're not out of the woods yet, but the numbers speak for themselves, and the generosity of the people of California and the governor is gratefully received. Beyond that, before I recognize Dr. Birx, let me just say that at the beginning of this challenging time, we want to challenge every American to continue to do what every American can do. And clearly, what we see in Washington and California, and what we are just beginning to see elsewhere, is put into practice the social distancing recommendations of the coronavirus guidelines for America. Listen to your state and local authorities. We really do believe that while this will be a week of heartache, it also is a week of hope. And as we see some of the cases beginning to level just for a day or two, it is our hope that what we have seen begin in the greater New York area and even in Louisiana and elsewhere will become a trend. But it only becomes a trend if every one of us continues to take ownership and continues to do our part for this 30 days to slow the spread. With that, I'll recognize Dr. Birx for the latest data, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I think you heard very clearly our concern in the New York, New Jersey metro areas. This also includes Connecticut and Long Island. As we talked about, we did see a significant increase in Sussex County over the weekend. The weekend numbers are always difficult. I want to be clear on that because sometimes case reporting is not as accurate over the weekend. So we'll be watching very closely today's numbers and Tuesday's numbers. We're also very, of course, focused on the New Orleans metro area, and that includes the 3 parishes of Jefferson, St. John's the Baptist, and New Orleans proper, and of course the Detroit area, which is Oakland and Wayne. As we mentioned before, we're continuing to track very closely out of concerns of it potentially reaching logarithmic phase in the Chicago metro area, the Boston metro area, the DC and Baltimore metro area, Indianapolis, the Denver area, and 2 regions of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia and the Pittsburgh area, as well as Dallas and Houston in the Texas area. I had a very encouraging call because we also don't want to miss anything. Remember, I showed you a lot of states were very much under 25 and 50 cases per 100,000. There were a few standouts that we were concerned about, which was Vermont, New Hampshire, Idaho, and Montana. We had excellent calls today with their health commissioners, and they're they're on top of the situation. These were micro outbreaks that occurred due to ski events and weddings and nursing homes, and they were able to describe in critical detail the incidents and how they're tracking and tracing. So they are still doing full contact tracing through those areas, and I just want to applaud both a rural and metro problem, and I really want to applaud how many of the states that may have smaller populations are approaching this. That gives us encouragement of how we can talk about beginning surveillance activities at the same time we're following these very clear outbreaks and ensuring that there's full supplies based on the very granular data that we're utilizing. And I just want to thank the mayors and governors who get us that granular data and allows us to make these deep interpretations across all of the United States. We know each governor is concerned about their areas, but these metro areas cover different areas. So the Philadelphia area also includes southern New Jersey and Delaware, and so we have to really look at things very much as both the metro and the communities that surround those metros. And so all of those people, we ask you again throughout the United States to follow these very clear guidance. I want to just recognize both HHS, and you heard about the work that Admiral Giroir is doing, the work that Dr. Hahn and Administrator Seema Verma are doing, and also Administrator Engels in the work of HRSA to really ensure that our federally funded clinics are actively engaged in all of these aspects. But I also want to recognize the military, the medical corps, the nursing corps, and the medical subspecialty corps. These were my brothers and sisters for 29 years. It is highly unusual for the active force to be called into a domestic situation. I think that shows you how seriously we're taking this at the federal government level. In my 29 years in the military, I was never deployed domestically. So this is showing you how serious of an event we take this. If the military is deploying domestically, it is another reason for every American to be following these guidelines. Finally, CDC quietly launched a new website. It's, if you go to cdc.gov and you go to COVID-19, you can find their surveillance data. This surveillance data is bringing together our influenza-like illnesses with their syndromic management databases so that you can track the respiratory disease across the United States. The states are used to using this system. It's in emergency rooms, it's in hospitals, it's in doctors' offices, and it gives you insight, and you can see very clearly influenza A peak. You can see the influenza B peak, and now you can start to see the respiratory disease from this current outbreak. These are the systems that exist within the United States that will be strengthened in order for us to do comprehensive surveillance. So I just want to assure the American people, while we're working on these outbreaks, we're also working on bringing new systems together that have a comprehensive look across the country, building on the strong work of CDC as a public health institution, so that we can work county by county, community by community, state by state, to really understand where this virus is and where it will be, but also as an early alert for us in the future. So I just want to assure the American people that as we're working on the crisis of today, we're looking to the future to ensure we have the systems in place to bring those early alert systems together while we work on the antibody testing and while we work on continuing spreading and increasing the diagnostic capabilities that you see presented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And Admiral Giroir spoke several times when the president was with us, so he'll be here for questions, as Deborah Birx will. But Dr. Fauci, your thoughts, and then we'll take some questions.
No, actually. Okay, I just wanted to, okay, I will. It related to something I said yesterday about that somewhat paradox of everything going up at the same time that the feeding into this engine of this virus is starting to show some signs. So Governor Cuomo today reported an interesting data from New York, namely that the number of hospitalizations, the number of admissions to intensive care, and the number of requirements for intubations over the last 3 days have actually started to level off. So again, everybody who knows me knows I'm very conservative about making projections, but those are the kind of good signs that you look for. You never even begin to think about claiming victory prematurely, but that's the first thing you see when you start to see the turnaround. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do. That tells me, instead of saying, that's pretty good, it's we got there through mitigation. We cut off the stream of people who ultimately required hospitalization, required intubation, required all of the kinds of extreme methods. So we just got to realize that this is an indication, despite all the suffering and the death that has occurred, that what we have been doing has been working. So the call that I say every time I get to this podium is just keep it up, because this is going to get us out of it. This is our best and only great public health tool.
And are we starting to see that across many states? We're seeing the level of hospitalizations and deaths is lower than what we anticipated.
Well, you're going to see it most dramatically, John, in a place like New York, where you see it goes up and peak, and then it will hopefully, and I think it will, come down. When you have places like Seattle, which and Washington State, who did a really good job from the beginning, it never really did that, so they were able to keep it down. And on the charts that Dr. Birx showed, when you saw California and Washington State, they were fortunate, they did a good job, that it never really got out of hand. So again, this is a big country, and you have a number of different metropolitan areas. I think if we do it right, you're going to see those who have not peaked will not peak, and those who have peaked, the New Orleans, the New York, New Jersey, Chicago, Detroit, and others, you're going to see the same thing if we keep our foot on the accelerator.
Dr. Fauci, thanks.
Further questions for the team?
Yes, sir. I'm just following up Dr. Fauci's comment earlier about what it's like going to be coming back to normal, and until there's a vaccine, that there'll be gradual steps towards restoring normalcy. Under that, short of a vaccine, does putting 80,000 people, fans, spectators in a sports stadium, or 25,000 politicos in an arena for a political convention this summer make a lot of sense, or does those sorts of things require a vaccine to fully protect the American populace?
No, I don't think that you're going to have to say that the country cannot get back to a real degree of normalcy until you absolutely have a safe and effective vaccine. It will be really evaluating the kinds of things, and that's the reason why it was discussed up here, why it's so important to have an antibody test so you know what the penetrance is in society. And then we have a situation where we don't ever want to get to have to mitigate. We want it to be able to contain. And by the time we have to face what's going to happen with this going back to normality, we will have in place the capability of identifying, isolating, contact tracing, so that it never gets out of hand. Ultimately, the showstopper will be obviously a vaccine where you can vaccinate people and you won't have it. There's going to be another issue that's going to be important, and it has to do with somewhat of a comparison, for example, with influenza. We go through multiple cycles of influenza. There's always a degree of background immunity in the population. I mean, that will ultimately happen if we get a situation where we get back to normal. Now, I hope we don't have so many people infected that we actually have that herd immunity, but I think it would have to be different than it is right now. So again, remember when you say normalcy, I mean, we could get back normally, economically and otherwise, without necessarily saying we're going to forget about the virus. We have to pay attention to this because we've had a very bad experience with this virus.
Thank you, and this is for the Vice President, for Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, but can you give us a sense of, and I know you don't want to make any projections, but where we are with the numbers, because we saw that horrible number today, more than 10,000 deaths now in the U.S. Are we on track for those best case scenario numbers that you had laid out, the 100,000? Or are we potentially coming in lower than that at this point, given some of what you're seeing?
It just gives me an opportunity to thank and respect the modelers who have really worked on this, because there's a large number of them have worked very hard and done a lot of predictions. And what we did is we did predictions of predictions. We like to integrate data, and so that's where you come up with these numbers. I think Dr. Fauci and I both strongly believe that if we work as hard as we can over the next several weeks, that we will see potential to go under the numbers that were predicted by the models. And I think that is really two things. It is the extraordinary compliance of the American people and the diligence that they have mitigated with. Because remember, we are doing this strictly by behavior change. It's very hard to change trajectory of viruses on just behavior change. We have had difficulty in our past doing that. So that's what we're doing, and that's what the American people are doing. But the other side of that is the incredible insights that Washington State and others are providing on how to better care for the patients in the hospital. And so those two pieces are coming together that could have a dramatic impact on the predictions of the mortality from this disease.
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I've said it a couple of times here. I want to say it again. Repetition is good. Is that models are good. They help us to make projections. But as you get data in, you modify your model. And I've always said, data always trumps models, always. So what I feel, and I believe that Dr. Birx also feels, that I don't think anyone has ever mitigated the way I'm seeing people mitigate right now. This has never happened in this country before. So I am optimistic, always cautiously optimistic, that if we do what I've been talking about over the past few minutes, we can make that number go down. I don't accept every day that we're going to have 100 to 200,000 deaths. I think we can really bring that down, no matter what a model says, because when the data comes in, they'll start to say, maybe you are essentially
overshooting the model. And I think that's where we can go. That's the reason why I like to always get up and tell the American people, it's the virus doing what the virus wants to do, and it's we as a society doing what we can do.
And let me just amplify that from a layperson's perspective. And the American people are doing it. I mean, the initial data, what we've seen in California and Washington, support the fact that the American people are doing these things, which is nothing short of loving your neighbor. I mean, the truth is, the threat of serious illness for most Americans is relatively low. But the threat of serious illness for seniors with underlying health conditions or anyone with an immunodeficiency is very high. And when we see Americans putting these principles into practice the way you all have been, it really means you're considering others more important than yourself. And I have to tell you, for the president, for me, for all of us, it's deeply inspiring. We just need to continue to do it for all of these 30 days, and we'll bring that number down. How about a couple more, please?
So, Mr. Vice President, when will you know, when do you think that you will know whether or not you will have to extend those 30-day guidelines, or if 30 days will be enough?
Well, the experts told us that somewhere around the middle of this month would be the peak. And as we begin to see a couple of days that might be the beginning of leveling, we're gonna watch that carefully, and we're gonna bring that information to the president. But for now, the decision is, and the request of every American, is to continue to put into practice all of the president's coronavirus guidelines, 30 days to slow the spread. And for all of you in areas that have been impacted broadly by the coronavirus, listen to what your state and local authorities are asking you to do. It will protect your health, your family's health, and it will save lives. Let's do a couple more, and for our panel, if you'd like. Jeff.
This is more of a personal question, but Dr. Birx, can you tell us if your granddaughter's okay? And
Yeah, I'd like to know too.
Well, thank you. Due to the great care of my 91-year-old nurse mother and my daughter, she's down to like 100 to 99 now, but it was 3 days of 104 and 105, which is, you know, babies can do that, but it's very scary, especially when I couldn't assure myself that she was fine. So it was just some sleepless nights for me and them as they kept our fever down. So thank you for asking.
Do you have the virus?
Oh,
or?
no, I'm sure it's roseola or something. They have not been out of the house. They are not allowed out of the house. They've got 2 granddaughters under 1, 2.5 almost, and one only 10 months, and my 91-year-old and 96-year-old. So no one is allowed in that house or out of that house because there's too much precious cargo inside the house.
How about one more question? We'll let
Thank
you
you,
all.
Mr. Vice President. For whoever wants to answer this, it's a technical question. So FEMA says that it is in the process of distributing 90% of each state's allocated supplies for the National Strategic Stockpile. And that allocation is determined based on population by the last census in each state. And the other 10%, it says, is going to frontline healthcare workers serving in the federal response efforts. So where are those healthcare workers in the federal response? And do you envision a scenario in which you could start giving states more supplies from the National Strategic Stockpile?
You know, it's a really good question. And let me say the Strategic National Stockpile, and I'm going to have Admiral Giroir speak about his piece of that, has been largely deployed. We are continuing to replenish it in part with a small portion of what's coming in from around the world. You've heard about our air bridge, now more than 50 flights that have been scheduled that are bringing millions of supplies into the United States. What we're doing is taking less than 10% of that, put it into the Strategic National Stockpile, so we have that to basically provide for states on an as-needed basis. But the other 90%, that system that I just described earlier when the president was here is working with the 6 major medical distributors in the country to deploy those resources to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Louisiana, Michigan, Illinois, the exact priority that you just heard Dr. Birx describe and that the data informs. And those decisions are being made every single day. And so while if a hurricane hits Florida or tornadoes or flooding tear through the state of Indiana, we're very accustomed to FEMA coming in, drawing from the national stockpile, providing specific resources. In this case, with a nationwide effort, what President Trump directed us to do was literally marshal the resources of the full economy to be able to make sure that we can meet the needs for personal protective equipment, ventilators, and all manner of supplies. And we're doing that in a small way through the Strategic National Stockpile, but in the largest way through that control tower system that Admiral John Plavsic is running for us, that is deploying those resources and making sure they're going straight to where they need to go. And as I said earlier, those decisions are being informed by the data, and they're literally being made by our team at FEMA on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. And we'll continue to keep you informed, as we did today, about where some of those are going. But let me let Admiral Giroir finish that answer.
I don't really have much more to add to that. The Vice President is certainly well informed about that. And I want to assure you that all the sourcing around the world, if it's there, we're putting it in our supply chains. We're buying more. Manufacturers are stepping up to the plate. And this is going not just by percent allocation, but it's going to the exact places that need it in the quantities that they need to take care of patients. And we want to make sure this is a two-way street. We get the data in from individual hospitals to know exactly what their burn rate is, exactly what they need. And we want to make sure that they feel comfortable that they're going to have supplies, because they will. Because part of this is about potential shortages some places. Most of it's about a fear of a shortage. If I'm a physician in an ICU and I'm not sure that it's going to be there, that's going to scare me. It's going to scare my nurses. So we want everyone to have that assurance that we will provide you what you need over weeks, periods of time, exactly to your need. And Admiral Plavsic and his team, and again, it's all military in there. I mean, he is the logistics guy for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? This is what he does. He is a wizard. There are more stars around me in the DoD part of the military than I've generally seen outside of the Pentagon. This is really being run as a military operation. I'm in the U.S. Public Health Service, so we're part of HHS. The Surgeon General and I have the honor of running that service. We are shoulder to shoulder in the field, in the military hospitals with everyone else. There are only 6,100 of us. 3,000 are doing direct patient care on a daily basis. We take care of the Indian Health Service, the Bureau of Prisons, those in detention at the border, et cetera. That's what we do. The other 3,000, over 2,000 of those are in the field already, taking care of patients directly, and we have more going out the door every day.
And if I could just follow up on that very quickly then, is it even worth then governors writing into FEMA if they've already received their 90% allocation and you're getting data directly from the hospitals to ask for more at this point?
This has been a very cooperative interaction. I bet I talk to 5 governors a day, and we talk out the issues and understand what they perceive in their state. They often help point us to particular areas that they feel need more attention or that needs more communication. So it's been very productive. I have to look up what governor goes to what state, because that's not my world, but it's been a very productive interaction. So I think all of this is necessary. I'm on almost every governor's call with the Vice President. They're very meaningful, they're impactful, they're informative, they're communicative. We talk to each other, but then we do get down to the individual hospital level, because when the rubber meets the road, you got to know what the docs, nurses, respiratory therapists, the people who clean the rooms are an important part of the team. I want them to come to every work saying, it's not that I clean a room, I'm saving lives today. And they are saving lives by keeping the viruses off the surfaces and reducing transmission. So you've really got to get that granular, and we're to a point with Admiral Pease. You have 2 admirals with the worst pronounced names in the world, so Admiral P, Admiral G, but Admiral P's team really has this covered down to the individual hospital level.
Thank you, sir.
Let me say, just by way of closing, because I thought that last question was helpful. We're interacting with governors every day, 7 days a week, and we welcome that. And while there are some resources in the Strategic National Reserve, we spoke about ventilators. We have some 9,000 ventilators on standby. We also have this vast array through the commercial system that when we hear from governors, we're identifying the needs. They're working every day to identify their hospital capacity. We went over governors today saying we need to know what your capacity is, what your normal capacity is, what your surge capacity is. We need to understand what your equipment complement is across the state. And governors have been doing this. They've been assembling that information. But I want to tell you, the governors across this country in both political parties have been doing a remarkable job. And the president's grateful, and I'm grateful. And I just want to know that those healthcare workers that they're serving and the families that those healthcare workers are serving can be confident that we are going to do whatever it takes to get them what they need when they need it. And every governor is working in that regard. Every hospital administrator is working in that regard. And the opportunity that we have, because the American people are stepping up so strongly and putting others ahead of themselves. In most cases, they're acting in a way that puts the health of others first. We're more confident today than ever before that we're going to be able to provide our healthcare providers and the states that are impacted with the coronavirus with the resources and the support they need to meet this moment. And we're just going to continue to work our hearts out and make that a reality. You know, but I have to end with just a reference to the healthcare workers. You've heard these doctors talk about them. They're all healthcare people. You've heard the president talk about them. You all have seen them. And to think what these healthcare workers, doctors and nurses and medical assistants are doing every day, it inspires us to get up early, to stay up late, to keep working, to make sure they have what they need to be able to continue to do their job courageously. And I know I speak on behalf of every American when I say how grateful we are for each and every one of you. And in this very special Holy Week, I know millions of Americans are praying for our healthcare workers. I saw a picture that I sent out last night on Twitter. It was an article about a series of cities where doctors and nurses had paused to pray for the patients and the families that they were ministering to. And I just want to say to all those healthcare workers, I know there is a chorus of prayer going up every day for all of you. And with your continued courageous service and with God's help, we'll get through this. And we'll get through it together. Thank you all.
Manual for Child and Vision Development Milestones is a precious guide that discusses the physical, social, motor, cognitive, language, and emotional development that occurs from birth through early adulthood for children with and without vision. It also discusses the possible effects of maltreatment on child development. This book contains the most recent research theories and findings of child and vision development investigated by eye care specialists and psychologists. The manual also consistently relates information to real-life situations and demonstrates the usefulness of psychology in everyday life situations involving children. The content is designed to educate and guide a broad range of readers, including students, parents, child specialists, and doctors on developmental norms at different stages of a child's life. This book is available in all formats regardless of sight impairment: text, ebook, and audiobook. It is also available on all online bookstores, inside the Eye Disease website, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and Zilibris.
Ki sa nou de konnen sou coronavirus la? Lave men nou ak dlo ak savon pendant 20 secondes. Ou bien chanter Happy Birthday 2 fois. Lave men nou souvent et très souvent. Len ap tousse nan koud nou. Éteignez dans un mouchoir et puis jetez. Désinfectez main nous avec sanitizer. Pas bailler la main, ni pas embrasser pièce moun. Pas mettre main nous dans bouche nous, dans yeux nous, ak dans main nous. Restez connecté avec PCVI Network pour plus d'informations sur le coronavirus là ou COVID-19.
Téléphone c'est 516 238 50.